Chapter 3, Blood and Shadow. The scout lunged. It came on all angles at once. Limbs flailing like a spider caught in firelight, talons slashing through the air with an ear-splitting shriek. Dreyfuss didn't flinch. He ducked low and swung with all his strength. Metal screamed against chitin. Sparks flew. The pipe connected with its midsection, sending the creature staggering back, its scream garbled and furious. The demon shifted, limbs folding inward before exploding outward again in a flurry of jagged motion. It moved with alien speed, faster than thought, faster than fear. It lashed at Dreyfuss with bladed arms, catching his coat and slicing a thin line across his ribs. He hissed through gritted teeth but didn't back away. Pain was an old companion. He circled, keeping the creature between him and the alleyway where the others had fled. His eyes never left the scout's glowing eye, the core of it, the brain, the curse. He watched how it tracked him, how it read his stance, how it braced to pounce. It wasn't just a beast, it was a hunter, but so was he. It leapt again. This time, Dreyfuss met it head-on, twisting at the last second and jamming the sharpened end of the pipe into one of its lower limbs. Black ichor spurted, sizzling as it hit the ground, and the creature shrieked with something that sounded almost like surprise. It reared back, limb twitching, its eye flickering with static. Dreyfuss didn't give it time to regroup. With a guttural roar, he drove forward, pipe raised like a banner. Blow after blow rained down, wild, imprecise, but driven by fury honed by loss. The scout shrieked, its form spasming, collapsing, unraveling like wet parchment in fire. Then silence. It twitched once, then stilled, its eye dimming, then dying. The chittering had stopped. The only sound was the frantic, ragged panting of Dreyfuss and the low, mournful sigh of the wind through the skeletal city. His chest heaved, a raw burn in his lungs, and his knuckles ached from the desperate, two-handed grip he'd had on the length of rusted pipe. Before him, the demon scout lay broken, a grotesque sculpture of shattered chitin and congealed shadow. Its single red eye dimmed to a dull, malevolent flicker before winking out entirely. Black, oily ichor, thick and foul-smelling, coated the pipe and dripped from Dreyfuss's hands, staining the tattered fabric of his sleeves. His face, grim and sweat-streaked, was smeared with the same vile substance, a macabre war paint. He had done it, but the cost was a deeper exhaustion, a fresh layer of grim determination settling over his already weary soul. He stood over the fallen scout for a moment, listening. The silence that followed the creature's death was profound, almost deafening, broken only by the distant familiar sounds of the shattered world. He strained his ears, searching for any echo of its chittering, any sign that it had communicated their presence before he dispatched it. Nothing. A grim satisfaction tightened his jaw. One less threat, at least for a few moments. Turning, he scanned the shadowy ruins. Astra. His voice was a harsh whisper, filled with an urgency that carried despite its low volume. It's clear. Come out. From the narrow crevice between the colossal, toppled turbines, a small, dust-caked face peered out. Astra, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief, slowly emerged, ushering the children ahead of her. Little Pip, still clutching Astra's leg, whimpered softly, while Finn and Alara looked at the dead demon scout with a mixture of terrified fascination. Behind them, Lyra and Kale crept out, their faces pale, their breaths still coming in ragged gasps. Old Man Boren and Jaren followed, their gazes fixed on the slain monstrosity. "Is it gone?" Astra asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes sweeping the surrounding darkness as if expecting more horrors to materialize. Dreyfuss merely nodded, his gaze distant, already assessing the next threat. For now. He wiped his hands on his trousers, trying to rid them of the demon's ichor, but the stain persisted, an indelible mark. "We need to move. Fast." As the group started to gather themselves, a chilling wet click echoed from the gloom just beyond their position. It was a sound too precise, too mechanical to be the wind, too deliberate to be falling debris. Dreyfuss spun, his makeshift pipe weapon raised. His eyes narrowed into slits. Then came the scream. It was Lyra, a sharp, choked cry of pure terror. From the shadow of a collapsed airship wing, a second demon scout materialized, a near-perfect mimic of the first. But this one was larger, its movements faster, its glowing red eye radiating an almost palpable malevolence. It had clearly been working in tandem with the first, or perhaps had heard the faint sounds of their struggle. Its multi-jointed limbs ended in wickedly sharp talons, and it lunged not at Dreyfuss, but at the vulnerable flank of the group. Lyra, still trying to shield Kale, screamed again as the demon's talons tore through her flimsy shawl, raking across her arm. Kale reacted instantly, pulling her back, but the demon was too fast. It swiped again, and Lyra crumpled to the ground, a guttural shriek escaping her lips as dark blood bloomed on her shoulder. Before Kale could even process the horror, the demon whirled, its form a blur, and its talons plunged into Jaren's side. The mechanic let out a choked cry, dropping his satchel of tools with a clatter, his hands going to the gushing wound. Old Man Boren, fumbling with his pistol, managed to fire a single, sputtering shot, but it merely ricocheted off the demon's chitinous hide with a pathetic clang. "No!" Astra cried, rushing forward, her small frame surprisingly fierce, instinctively moving to shield the children. Dreyfuss moved then, a blur of desperate motion. He knew he couldn't let this demon escape, couldn't allow it to report their presence. He met the charging scout head-on, swinging the pipe with a furious, almost wild abandon. The metal shrieked against chitin, a dull thud echoing through the ruins as he connected, forcing the creature back. The demon hissed, its red eye burning, and retaliated with a flurry of strikes, forcing Dreyfuss to twist and duck, barely evading its lethal talons. He felt the wind of its passing, the brush of its vile hide, the heat radiating from its malevolent form. His movements were desperate, bordering on reckless. Each swing of the pipe was aimed at the demon's vulnerable joints, its glowing eye, its fragile skull. The demon was quicker, more agile than the first, and it had the element of surprise. He was bleeding from a shallow cut on his cheek, a burning sting where one of its talons had grazed him. He could feel the familiar, cold dread creeping in, the echoes of past failures. His gaze flickered to Astra, to the whimpering children, to Lyra bleeding on the ground, and a raw, primal rage flared within him, momentarily overriding the despair. With a guttural roar, Dreyfuss put every ounce of his remaining strength into a desperate thrust. The rusted pipe, sharpened by impacts, plunged into the demon's exposed neck joint. There was a sickening crunch, a fountain of black ichor, and the scout spasmed, its chittering turning into a gurgling shriek. It thrashed, its limbs flailing wildly, before collapsing into a twitching heap, its movements slowly fading, the light in its eye extinguishing like a snuffed candle. Dreyfuss stood over it, chest heaving, the pipe dripping with fresh demon blood. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors and the faint sobs of Lyra. "Are you all right?" Astra was by his side instantly, her eyes scanning him for wounds, her concern overriding her own fear. He nodded, a jerky motion. "Not as bad as them." He gestured to the fallen. The scene that met them was grim. Lyra lay on the ground, clutching her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers. Her face was ashen, her breathing shallow. Kale was kneeling beside her, his own hands shaking, a silent plea in his eyes. Jaren was worse. He lay still, a rapidly expanding pool of darkness beneath him, his breathing a wet, rattling sound. Old Man Boren was slumped against a wall, his face pale, muttering prayers, his pistol discarded beside him. "Jaren," Astra whispered, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands hovering, unsure how to help. His eyes were wide, fixed on nothing, a faint tremor running through his body. His hands twitched, as if still reaching for a tool that could fix this broken world. Within moments, the last ragged breath shuddered out of him. His eyes remained open, staring. Jaren, the pragmatic mechanic, was gone. Lyra was fading fast too. Her breaths were shallow gasps, her eyes glazing over. Kale sobbed openly, holding her tightly. Lyra, no, please Lyra. Astra, despite her own terror, quickly assessed the situation. We can't move them like this, she said, her voice strained, the natural healer within her taking charge. Jaren is gone. Lyra, she's lost too much blood. We need to stop the bleeding and quickly. And the children, they're terrified. She glanced at Dreyfuss, her gaze filled with desperate urgency. We need to make camp, now, before something else finds us. Dreyfuss looked around the exposed ruins. Making camp here was madness. The scout had found them. More were surely on their way, drawn by the residual demonic energy or the scent of blood. But Astra was right. They couldn't move the injured, not without risking their lives further. The children needed shelter, and they all needed a moment to recover from the brutal ambush. A camp, he echoed, his voice raw. He surveyed the immediate vicinity, his mind racing. There had to be somewhere, some place that offered a modicum of defense, a chance to treat the wounded. His eyes drifted towards the distant, jagged line of the foothills, and then, a little closer, to a dark maw in the side of a partially collapsed rock face, obscured by twisted, steam-blasted trees. A cave. It was dangerous, unknown, but offered immediate shelter from prying eyes and the chilling night. The cave, he stated, pointing with the bloodied pipe. It's not far. We move quickly, quietly. Astra, Boren, help Kale with Lyra. I'll clear the path and watch our rear. His gaze hardened. No more losses. The unspoken weight of Jaren's death and Lyra's precarious state settled over them. They moved with a renewed, desperate urgency. Kale, his face streaked with tears and dirt, gently lifted Lyra, cradling her against his chest. Her head lolled, her breathing a faint rasp. Old man Boren, shaking off his daze, used his walking stick as a makeshift support for Kale, his grizzled face a mask of grim determination. Astra, ever practical, scooped up little Pip, clutching her close, while Alara and Finn clung to her other hand, their eyes wide and silent. Dreyfuss led the way, his senses hyper-alert, moving through the debris with a swift, almost silent precision. He kept his head on a swivel, his eyes darting into every shadow, his ears straining for any sound beyond their own ragged breaths. The pipe was still gripped tightly in his hand, a crude but effective weapon. The sheathed sword on his back felt heavier than usual, a constant, mocking presence. The fight with the scout had been instinctual, brutal, but it had drained him. He felt the familiar surge of frustration, the burning anger at his own powerlessness when it truly mattered. He had used his hands, a piece of scrap metal, and sheer desperation. The sword, it remained bound, a weapon of legend that refused to heed his call. He pushed the thought aside. There was no time for it now. Survival was all that mattered. The short trek to the cave was fraught with tension. Every creak of metal, every shift of rubble, sent a jolt of fear through the group. They passed the husks of ancient steam trains, their tracks twisted into grotesque knots, and the skeletal remains of colossal, multi-limbed automatons, frozen mid-stride, their gears rusted solid. The air grew colder, the wind more biting, as they approached the rocky outcrop. The cave mouth was a gaping maw, shrouded in shadow, its interior lost to the deepening twilight. It smelled of damp earth and something else, something wild and untamed. Dreyfuss moved in first, pipe raised, his eyes adjusting quickly to the gloom. He swept the small cavern, confirming it was empty of immediate threats, though a lingering, animalistic scent clung to the air. Clear, he announced, his voice echoing in the confined space. One by one, they shuffled into the cave, the relative darkness a welcome cloak. Kale gently laid Lyra down on a relatively flat patch of ground, his gaze never leaving her. Astra was already rummaging in her satchel, pulling out crude linen strips and a small, stoppered vial of antiseptic made from scavenged chemicals. We need light, Boren rasped, his voice trembling. Jaren's tools, scattered where he fell, now lay silent testimony to their loss. Astra quickly found a scavenged steam lamp from her pack, its intricate brass casing surprisingly intact. With a few practiced movements, she managed to ignite its small, enclosed flame, casting a flickering golden glow that pushed back the oppressive shadows. The warm light, though dim, brought a small measure of comfort, illuminating the weary, tear-streaked faces of the survivors. Kale, help me elevate her leg, Astra instructed, her voice calm and steady, despite the tremor in her hands. She worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound on Lyra's shoulder, her brow furrowed in concentration. The gash was deep, long, and bleeding profusely. This is bad, very bad. As Astra worked tirelessly on Lyra, Dreyfuss stepped to the cave entrance. He didn't go far, just enough to have a clear view of the approach, his back a silent sentinel against the darkness. He watched the last vestiges of twilight fade, giving way to the oppressive blackness of night. The purple glow of the distant demon towers seemed to pulse with a more sinister intensity now, their alien light casting long, shifting shadows that danced like phantom demons across the ruined landscape. He heard Kale's heartbroken sobs as he watched Astra desperately try to save Lyra. He heard the children's hushed whimpers and Boren's low, mournful prayers. He thought of Jaren, lying cold and broken out there, another life snuffed out, another name added to the endless tally. The bitterness welled within him, a familiar, acrid taste on his tongue. He had promised to protect them. He had failed again. The sheathed sword on his back felt like a crushing weight, a symbol of his impotence, a reminder of the day he lost everything. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, seeing not the ruined cityscape, but another place, another time, another face consumed by flames and shadow. The images, though fleeting, were enough to make him clench his fists, his knuckles white against the bloodied pipe. He had to be stronger. He had to. We need to bury Jaren, Astra said after a while, her voice heavy, a grim finality in her tone. And Lyra, she needs rest. We can't move her until the morning, if she even makes it through the night. Her eyes met Dreyfuss's, filled with a raw, desperate plea. We're trapped here until dawn. Dreyfuss looked out into the unyielding darkness, then back at his decimated group. Lyra's life hung by a thread, Jaren was gone, and the others were shaken to their core. He understood the unspoken sentiment. They were broken for now. Agreed, Dreyfuss said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet carrying an unwavering resolve. He picked up a piece of scavenged rebar, its end sharpened to a crude point. I'll start digging. He would dig Jaren's grave, a silent promise to the fallen, and then he would stand watch, the unblinking guardian, until the first rays of the sun pierced the demonic night. They would survive this. They had to.